Hello, I want to go through real quick and explain my design process as I went through the iterative loops designing this game. I created this project for a school assignment in my Game Design 1 class, and I had a little over a month to make it, give or take. In the prior classes, we had been talking about a few things. Firstly, we were talking about toys and how they were just fun to mess around with and play and just engage with. So we were to use that sort of as a base, and the toy I chose was a camera. We were also talking about implementing messages in games and starting the process of going through iterative loops with our development. The theming I chose was the connection between, or the relationship between humanity and our wildlife neighbors. Have not exactly had the best relationship, and that was a message that I wanted to get across with this project. But camera, first and foremost, was where I started. I got to work making the camera itself. You can take photos, zoom. I can actually play this a little bit too. There's the zoom functionality here. There's auto-focusing, so if you look at something up close, it won't focus quite right. And you can snap photos that are graded with a rank up in the top left corner. You can see more of that in the full play. And I created a grading system that was based on scale, pose, and framing. Pretty self-explanatory. The pose, however, I made a misstep with. Ideally, something like this would be a good pose, but I ended up making it so the highest pose score was from the front face of every single animal, which was not the best idea. Regardless, during the first loop, I was just focused on making that camera fun to use and being able to snap photos. Now, there were other terms to our assignment. One of the terms that we had to, or requirements that we had to do, was create 4 distinct areas in a level that the player travels between. And with this in mind, I was thinking, how can I use that framing to make taking pictures fun and make sense? Because something I had been thinking about for quite a while was, what is the contextual reason our character is wanting to take photos in the first place? And importantly, how could I connect that to the theme that I want to convey? So my solution to all of these issues that I was having was to have the separate areas blocked off and connected by what I call gatekeepers. These gatekeepers will task the player with showing them a photo of a specific animal with a certain ranking or higher. This first area, he asks you for a photo of a deer that is rank B or higher, I believe. So this was around the end of that first design loop I was going through. So I created a gatekeeper in between every single area, and the gatekeepers progressively treat animals worse and worse until you get to the end here, where it's quite literally dead animals. That was sort of the end of the first loop I went through. Now, the second loop, I had to identify risks and mitigate them. And there was also a few loose ends from that first loop that I needed to change, given how much it had changed. Firstly, when I created the deer's AI, that was not in mind for a puzzle progression system, because every area kind of acts like its own little puzzle, where the player has to figure out how to get the photo of the animal, like how to be right here and take the photo. And that is the puzzle that the player has to solve. But the first version of the deer AI I made would run away way too suddenly, too timid, and it was just on sight. He would identify when you were near him, he would turn to look at you and run away. So I made a lot of important changes. Firstly, being the footstep and sound detection system. So as the player sprints, walks, or crouches towards the animal, the range that the animal will be able to hear the player decreases the quieter they are. And if the deer hears you, it will turn to look at you. And if it sees you, it will run away. So the player can get pretty close by crouching, close enough to take a photo if they do it just right. But that proved to be very difficult alone, so I also added these bushes where the player can hide and the deer will not see them. It will also mask their footsteps. So they can essentially get really close to the deer, and they could wait for the deer to get close to them to snap a photo, or they could wait for a good opportunity to pop out and get one. And through play testing, players were able to get this on their second or third try, which I think was pretty fair. Moving on to the second area, I wanted to incorporate another mechanic in with this game for the player to play around with. So I added a physics interaction system with these carrots. This rabbit here would hide away in both of these holes when the player tries to get close, and would only come out when they were far away, or if the player dragged a carrot over to lure him out. And that is the only way to get a picture of the rabbit good enough for this gatekeeper to let you through. And for this sheep here, I was running out of time for my deadline, so I had to incorporate everything the player had learned up to this point into like one final challenge with this sheep. And the two things they have learned were the animal's sight and timidness to sound, and the physics interaction system. So I thought of a clever way to combine those two together. This sheep is more gentle and timid than the deer, so it runs away much easier. There is no way you're going to get a desirable picture of this sheep by just trying to walk up close to it or sneak behind. There are bushes here, but the bushes around here will not mask your footsteps, and the sheep generally will not just like wander over to where you are. He kind of likes to stick around over here. The ideal way to complete this challenge is you have to herd the sheep. Sheeps are herdable animals, and as you chase them, they will run away from you. And you will want to herd the sheep into this corner here where it can't run away. And to make sure you get it in that corner and to keep it from running away, these hay bales can be dragged to block the sheep's navigation system. So if you were to take these haystacks and line them up here, the sheep will not run through because he detects that as a wall. So if you do that to one side or both sides, you really only need one since you're standing over here. He will have no choice but to run over here, where the player is easily able to get a photo, passable for this M&M farmer to let you through. And during this final area, I was really low on time. This was the last area I needed, but I wanted to wrap up my message that I had been telling through these gatekeepers. Progressively, these gatekeepers treat animals worse and worse. This first guy loves animals and the wildlife, and it's very obvious when you talk to him. And the second one loves animals, but he owns them as pets on a pet level. So as companions / little slaves, take it as you want, they are not free. And this third farmer here is keeping animals captive and raising them from birth to get product from them or to turn them into product. But the latter more so lies with this guy who owns the slaughterhouse around the corner where these piggies have been strung up. And I also wanted a shock factor because that will really drive the message home. So I thought of a clever little way to wrap this up, where if the player comes over here and snaps a photo of the desired object, while the photo is still on screen, the player gets teleported into this box here. And when the camera disappears, the photo that they just took disappears, they are suddenly in this area when their camera comes down. And it's has a huge shock factor because these are all the animals that you just saw, and we are eating them as food. So that's what this guy here kind of talks to you about. I love that angle. Wow. Wow. I only had time for those 2 iterative loops as I was going through this, but I have thought of what I would change if I were to do a 3rd loop. I've identified a couple risks that I think are worth mitigating. Firstly is the puzzle structured gameplay is kind of working against my initial concept of having just a fun time using the camera, because there's only one animal in each area, and every single animal, the pose is off, like I mentioned before, where you have to take it from the front. And that is not fun, because for most people, this would be a more ideal photo from the side where you can see the whole deer. I think to enjoy using the camera, there should be more things to take pictures of and more rewards for taking pictures of other things. I really think that's the main risk that I identified here. If there was a 3rd loop, I would have to think of a solution to that. Maybe the puzzle-based structured gameplay would not be so linear, so the player has more options and can take pictures of different things to go different ways. It could really open up to be more than just a linear 4-area dialogue-driven message kind of game. But yeah, those are my thoughts on the development of this project, just of how my design process changed over time as I was thinking about what to do.